Hello, class, and welcome to the next week. I think we're going to go over hardening this week. Let's look at the announcements real quick. Yeah, we're hardening, which will be due shortly, and by the end of the week, and we're into lesson 6, and so we're going to go over Microsoft Windows operating system course is what we go over. I'll also try to introduce some Linux ideas, but again, they will not be on the final exam. So the required readings are chapter 9 and chapter 10, which actually I had to look. I believe we went over chapter 9 last week. Let's go to the content and check, because I think this week is only chapter 10. So actually, this week is chapter 11. So I just need to update that announcement. And so we're going to be going over chapter 11, and we'll look at Microsoft Windows operating system and apply system hardening techniques to Microsoft Windows. We'll look at general hardware hardening concepts and strategies, look at hardening servers, clients, networks, and more. And then we'll finally wrap up with security awareness. And then, like I said, I'll go over Linux a little bit. The discussion will go over security awareness, and it's when a user does not follow security procedures, what are two consequences to the organization you would emphasize and why? And not following security procedures can be very detrimental to the organization and to an individual as well, and no matter the size of your organization. And then the lab, there's only one lab this week, which is lab 8, and so if you get your lab done, and then also there's the discussion, and then finally the written assignment too. I know a few people have worked ahead, which is great. Love to see you doing the assignments early. Feel free to turn them in. I try to grade them right after you submit them in. And so again, like I said, we're going to be going over chapter 11, hardening Microsoft Windows operating system. And our objective is going to be to apply system hardening techniques in Microsoft Windows. The key concepts will include general hardening concepts and strategies, hardening servers, clients, networks, and more, and security awareness. So understanding the hardening process and mindset, we need to employ strategies to secure our Windows computers. We need to install only applications that we need. We use the security compliance toolkit, and we'll manually disable or remove programs and services. So only what we need, and then of course through maintenance we need to go in to disable other programs and remove them entirely. And so one of the strategies to secure Windows computers is to disable and remove programs with vulnerabilities and establish controls on running programs. So the programs that we have out there, we need to update those programs as well. We need to update our operating system, periodically. Normally we do it monthly. You may be on a different schedule, but we also need to make updates, security updates to our applications as well. And that process, the process of making configuration changes and deploying controls to reduce attack surfaces called hardening. And that's what we refer to it as, reducing the attack surface. So install only what you need. When installing Windows servers, select the programs to install. Customize the servers by defining one or more roles. The roles predefined with a set of services, programs, and configuration settings that enables the computer to fulfill specific requirements. So if we're setting up an email server, and it would be set up differently than a print server, for example, and also a file server. So all those are 3 different roles, and they should have be set up, customized based on what the servers perform. The Security Compliance Toolkit is a set of tools for Microsoft to help manage Windows security baselines. It provides guidance to administrators that make it easier and ensures policies adhere to policy best practices. It includes 2 tools to help manage baseline input and group policy objects or GPOs. And allows us to compare to best practices from Windows. And so we can, like our policy analyzer selection window, we can select a policy and then and select roles, server roles for policy analyzer. And then eventually we're going to manually remove policies as needed. We got a couple websites, just a little further information, learning about the Microsoft Compliance Toolkit. So the toolkit consists of tools and templates designed by Microsoft for security. It helps security administrators access security configuration baselines for Windows and other Microsoft products, such as Microsoft Edge, which is seldom used. With Microsoft Security Compliance Toolkit, you can download, analyze, test, edit, save configuration baselines recommended by Microsoft and use them for different purposes, such as a comparison to the policies in your environment. So just some of the things in this article are Microsoft Security Compliance Toolkit, the tools, the Policy Analyzer tool, Local Group Policy Object tool, the Set Object Security tool, the GPO2 Policy Rules tool, how do you use the Microsoft Security Baselines, and FAQ. And then how can the toolkit benefit your organization? Is the toolkit suitable for small businesses? Can you customize security baselines provided by the toolkit? Does it offer cloud security solutions? And is there any cost? And finally, summary. So the SCT, the Microsoft Security Compliance Toolkit, holds tools that help security administrators download, examine, test, edit, and store security configuration baselines for various Microsoft products suggested by Microsoft. It enables security administrators to effectively control their company's GPOs, since they're the main mechanism for applying and implementing various settings in Windows environment. This popular toolkit can help compare your current GPOs with other business like Microsoft recommended GPO security configurations. So Microsoft is continually, making updates and changes and suggestions. And for example, if we look over to Microsoft's website on Tech Community, they have the latest Windows hardening guidelines and key dates, and you can see, that almost monthly there's hardening changes coming out, or at least multiple times throughout the year. And let's see. So you can closely look at your GPOs, make and save new GPO backup file format changes, and apply changes via the Active Directory or individually via local policy. So if you download the Toolkit 1.0, you obtain security baselines for your suggested policy settings. So looking at the tools available in the Security Compliance Toolkit, it includes the security baselines for different Windows versions. And so depending on if we're using Windows Home, Windows 10, or if we're using Server, and then 2022 or 16. And so they only do update the security baselines as they're providing support for versions of Windows Server. So they're going to always have the latest ones out, and then they'll usually go back about 5 or 6 years, sometimes a little bit longer. So it's 2024, and they're saying that, they go all the way back to 2206. So that's quite a ways. There is still a lot of older server versions in a lot of businesses. Other tools include the Policy Analyzer, the Local Group Policy Object, Set Object Security, and GOP to Policy Rules. And you can quickly download these tools together with baselines for Microsoft version. And there's a Microsoft Security blog for more details on security baseline recommendations. So the Policy Analyzer tool, you can analyze and compare a set of GPOs. Other features include highlighting when a set of GPOs has unnecessary settings or internal irregularities, determining the key differences between groups and versions of GPOs, comparing the GPOs against current local policy and local register settings, and exporting the results to Microsoft Excel spreadsheets, which makes it easier to make changes. And with the tool, you can create a collection of GPOs as a single unit, so you can determine if you had duplicate settings exist across your GPOs. And this is especially important if you have conflicting values in your GPOs. And then you can compare a baseline and then compare the baseline to a snapshot taken earlier, determine the changes that you made with your GPOs. And there's a tech community also has a blog here's for the Policy Analyzer blog, and goes in more detail. And so if you wanted to follow the Microsoft tech community, and so you can see that's right in the Microsoft. See, so the local group policy object tool, or LGPO, object tool represents a command line utility for helping automate management of local group policy. And so if you're making multiple changes, it's much easier to do with command line. Enables administrators to quickly verify the effects of group policy settings. It's also helpful in controlling non-domain joined systems. It imports and enforces settings from registry.pol files and advanced auditing backup files, security templates, and formatted LGPO text files. The tool can also explore local policy, do a group policy options backup. Additionally, it can extract details from registry policy file to the LGPO text format that you can edit and create registry policy files. And then again, the Microsoft guidance has a complete guide on the local group policy object utility. So if you go to Microsoft's website, you can see, it tells you about the tool and tells you its features. And if you don't have it installed, you can download the file. The Set Object Security tool helps security administrators place the security descriptor for any Windows security object, including files, event log services, SMB shares, directories, and registry keys. When dealing with registry objects and file system, you can also determine if you should apply inheritance rules. You can send the security descriptor in a .reg file, compatible description of security descriptor in the binary registry value. The Set Object Security application is a 32-bit standalone executable that needs no installer, has no dependencies, are redistributed DLLs, dynamic link libraries, and works on all supported 86 and 64 versions of Windows. And you can see an example of the screen with the parameters. And then Microsoft provides a blog on the on this tool as well. So you can go in here and it shows you the screens for the policy analyzer, and it shows you the policy rules. The GPT-2 policy rules tool, you'll get it with the policy analyzer tool. It's a command line, ensures automatic transferation of GPO backups to policy analyzer, and it allows you to avoid the GUI. And that was the same one we saw, but it's right here, the policy rules. You can see they're doing a baseline on it. So how to use it? Microsoft recommends implementing proven industry standard configurations, such as Microsoft Security Baselines, instead of creating your own baseline. These baselines can ensure the user and device configuration settings comply with a baseline. For example, Microsoft Endpoint Configuration Manager, Group Policy, Microsoft Intune, which is now renamed Microsoft Endpoint Manager, can help you configure a unit with setting values defined in the baseline. So you can sign into the Endpoint Manager Admin Center and select Endpoint Security, view security baselines as shown in the figure below. And then, so here's the figure below, and as soon as you create the file, it's published to the signed group. So you can see your endpoint security in the overview. In a nutshell, security baselines can help reduce costs and increase flexibility. You can download suitable security baselines and follow Microsoft instructions on how to use them properly. So just looking at some of the FAQs, how can the toolkit benefit my organization? The toolkit provides valuable insights into best security practices, help achieve compliance with industry standards, and strengthens overall security posture. So if we're going to use Windows or any operating system, we want to follow, some of their recommendations. There, of course, we may increase the security, but we want to at least be meeting the security guidelines. So it's suitable for small businesses, organizations, all sizes. Even use on your network at home. You can customize the toolkit and line it with our own organization security requirements and needs. It does address cloud security challenges and help secure cloud-based environments. And it's a free resource provided by Microsoft to assist organization bolstering their cybersecurity. So it makes a good choice for security administrators who use policy and baselines in Windows environment. And it provides a policy analysis for Edge and Microsoft 365. You can check settings with other policies and what's placed locally. Ensures automated interaction comparison with policy settings. Define overlapping, conflicting, and unnecessary settings. So it's a practical and effective tool with many benefits for Windows. Let's see. Just blow up this screen so we can see it a little bit better. So like I said, it has two tools, policy analyzer selection window, and the Windows security configuration wizard. Select server roles, policy analyzer. And we should manually disable and remove all programs and services not required or needed. So we should back up the Windows registry before making any changes. Always do that, make a backup. Make changes on a test computer whenever possible. We should be doing this. This is similar in other operating systems as well. As far as Linux, it's always good to make a backup before you make any changes. And then if we can do it in a QA system or a dev environment, and then make the changes and evaluate, how the computer acts, make sure it's working appropriately. Identify the remaining program services we don't need, and then remove those unneeded programs. Use the Microsoft Windows Services maintenance utility to stop, and change service settings. And so we should always be using the services window, which I'll show you in a minute. Uninstalling a program. So we go to the control panel and then once we have the control panel up, then we can go in and add and remove and there's two different ways. If you're used to it goes right here, you can see the classic version or do by category, and it's right there. You go right into uninstall programs, and so this is how you would want to remove your programs, because it removes the programs from your registry. And so that's how we want to go through the control panel to remove programs in Windows. And we should be going through and uninstalling programs as we don't need them. Let's see. And you can also make changes or repair a program. Windows Services window, we should do the same. We should uninstall or stop services that aren't needed. and you can do the same. You can do the same. You can go. I already have the services window up, but bring and just search for services and bring up your services window, and then you can start and stop services. And if you haven't taken like C++, you can actually create more services. And so on your server, you're going to possibly create services to process files, to send messages, and then there's other services that you can download as well. And you can see that you can go to the status and you can see which ones are running, how they're triggered. So an application may trigger them. They could be automatic, they could be manual. We talked before about BitLocker. That's one of the services that's out there. There's there's the Hyper-V services. So there's quite a few services that come with Windows and Windows update. So you can see, if you're not familiar with these, there's some of these services that you see. They usually don't impact your computer's performance too much. They're running in the background and are available as needed. So that's our services window. The other one that also shows is like a DHCP, the Dynamic Host Control Protocol. And then if we click on one of the services, it can show you how it starts up. We can start it, stop it, pause it. We can resume it. So at certain times when you're system admin, you may need to go in and stop services. And that could, again, be like on an email server if you want to pause your email service. Hardening Microsoft Windows operating system authentication. We should disallow older authentication methods, remove or disable any unused and inactive user accounts, protect the administrator account, establish and enforce strong account policies, including our password policy, our account policy, and our verbosis policy. So, the things we talk about is, how often they have to change their password, how complex it has to be. We need to identify network server and client services that require access to ports, modify firewall settings to open those ports and close ports not needed. And then to manage firewall settings, use Windows Defender Firewall with advanced security and our local group policy editor. Here's our Microsoft Defender firewall, and you can see our Defender rules. It's on. Our private files on. Our public files on, and then we start showing our inbound and outbound rules. And then with editor, we can get to the group policy management. Look at the rules. Let's see. Look at those. There's a little bit about Microsoft Windows services.
Now, before we get started, I do want to make sure I clarify what a service is, because there's a few different things that are called services. But in this case, what we're talking about is a Windows service. So if you if you hit the Windows key and just type service, this is what you get, a list of services. And these are things that run in the background on your computer. Notice that there's some that are running and some that are not. So here's the list of ones that I have running. And there's a lot of them. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Some people kind of freak out and see all the things running in the background. It's only a problem if they're really heavy and take up a lot of resources. But a lot of services just kind of sit there in the background and do things occasionally. And that's what we're going to create today. Something that does something occasionally. It's not heavy. It's not going to slow your computer down significantly in any way. So, but for example, let's just pull a few here. Hyper-V. So Hyper-V is a virtual machine management system that runs in Windows. And I have that installed and it's running. So I can run virtual machines if I want to. And there's a whole bunch more in here. MySQL on port 80 is running. or MySQL 80. I'm not sure it's port 80, but there's a whole bunch in here. SQL is here, remote desktop is here, and so forth. So that's the services list. We're going to add our own called Simple Heartbeat Service. So just to make sure, let's come down here and look for SI. And there's SH and then SM. So there's no Simple Heartbeat Service listed here. So just kind of keep that in mind, because eventually we're going to put a service there. So we have a command or a console application. Now you may have thought that we do this instead. Let me just kind of point this out. There's a project type. If you search for service, you'll probably find, well, WCF service is something totally different, but then there's Windows service right here. We could have used that project type. The problem with this project type is it's very hard to debug. And so instead of doing that, we're going to use a console application, which is going to do the same exact thing as that service project type, only we can also run it as a console application. And the benefit there is we can run it locally and debug it, or we can install it as a service. And we don't have to attach to that service in order to debug it then, and then redeploy it every time. And that's kind of the problem with the built-in service type project, is that in order to debug it, you have to install it, get it to run your machine, and then attach the debugger to that running application to debug it. And I find that when I'm initially creating an application, that debugging process is a lot of back and forth. And so if I make one fix and think that's the whole fix, and then I deploy it again and it's not the whole fix, and I do it again and again and again, that's a long process. This makes it shorter by using it as a console application. Now I could do this manually and just create the whole thing manually and install it with a command line and all the rest. But I'm going to make my life a little easier and use a tool. And the tool is open source. It's been around for a long time, and it will be around for a long time. And that is Top Shelf. So right click on References, go to Manage NuGet Packages, and we're going to search for Top Shelf. This first one right here, 3.45 million downloads, so it is very popular. It has been used a lot, obviously, but it also has a lot of integrations. For example, Squirrel Updater. So we talked about the Squirrel desktop installer application before. Well, this will allow you to do updates using Squirrel to your service. But we're just going to use just Top Shelf for today, and we'll hit install. All right, and we're done. Now, the first thing I want to do is I actually want to create my service code. Now, service code's a little bit different than a console application. A console application has a start and end, and it kind of just flows linearly. So you start at the beginning of this curly brace, and by the time you get to the end, you're done. And that's not really what a service does. It continues to run in the background forever, potentially. And so we're going to have to create something to do that. And it's a really simple little, kind of like a template or formula you do. So let's create a class, and this class is going to be the class where it's actually doing the service work. So we're going to call this the Heartbeat. Let's call it Heartbeat. Make it public. And in here, we have to have a few things. First of all, we need to have a start method and a stop method, both public. And that start will get called when we're starting our service. And the stop will get called when we stop our service. So let's set that up. But first, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up what this is going to do. In this case, really simple stuff. I'm going to have a timer run. And it's going to run every second. And when the timer elapses, I'm going to write to a file just the date and time. Simple. Okay, so private read only timer. Now I hit Control dot to add a user statement, but there's two different kinds of timers. So we have system.threading and system.timers. These two are similar in nature, and in fact, they will work the same way if you have a simple application. But if you get into a multi-thread situation, what you really want is not the threading one, but the timers one. The timers one is actually thread safe. So let's use the system.timers. And we'll call this _timer. And now what we'll do is create a constructor, CTOR, and we'll say that the timer equals new timer, and we'll give it a 1 second interval. So it counts in milliseconds. So 1000 is 1 second. I also want to set the auto reset to true. And what that does is says, okay, when you've elapsed your time, I want you to start over. So go 1 second and then do it again and again and again. And I want to create an event for this. So when the time has elapsed, and I'll hit tab to create that event. I'll close this out. Now it does create the name is _timer _ elapsed. I don't like that. Let's just call it timer elapsed like so. And there we go. So now we have the timer elapsed event. I might want to even make this a little better. So just call it timer elapsed like so. And now it looks a little more like a normal method. Now events typically do have the lowercase because they're attached to a type like timer, but I think it looks a little cleaner. So we're going to do it. Okay. The throw new not implemented exception. Since I created that automatically, what this does is it creates a new not implemented exception inside my code because it's saying, I created this code for you, but I don't want you calling this thinking it's all done. So if you ever actually call this, it's going to throw an exception, which is what you want until you put real code in here. But when we're ready to put real code in here, we can get rid of the exception. Now in here, I have a couple different things I can do, but I am going to use the file append all lines method. So let's create some just one line, but I'll create an array. Equals new string array. And I'm going to have one line in here, which is datetime.now.toString. Like so. And so even though this is not in quotes, this is one string add to the string array. And I can use this string array now to say file, which I do control dot, and add the using system.io. So file.append all lines. We have to give it a path, which I'm going to hard code. In a real world situation, you'd probably want to put this into a config file. But ctemp, we'll put it in the demos folder. We're going to create a file here called heartbeat.txt. So we're going to append all lines, which we only have one line, but that's okay. And I did this because if I ever wanted to add a second line, it's just easier to add it to that array than it is to do the append all text, which I have to add the new line at the end and make sure I do that every time, and just ignore that. I want to do it this way, it's easier. So what this will do is it'll append the string datetime.now to the end of the text file. Now, if a text file does not exist, this append all lines will create it. Now, the path does have to exist, so make sure that path is valid for your application if you're going to run this yourself. So all it's going to do every time we hit 1 second, it's going to run this event method, which creates that one line and writes it to the heartbeat text file at the end. So we'll just see the date time every time increase by 1 second, essentially. So that's the timer, and that's the constructor that sets the timer up, but it hasn't started the timer yet. And that's where we get into our public void start, which just says timer.start. We're going to do the same thing for public void stop. Timer.stop. So now we have our constructor, which sets up a timer. Then we have a start method, which starts the timer, and a stop method, which stops the timer. So if the service is started, then that timer is going to keep ticking 1 second, 1 second, 1 second, and keep writing to that text file. When the service is stopped, the timer stops. It doesn't write the text file anymore. So that's basically our complete service. Now for you, you might want to do something different in here. And we'll talk about that in a minute, about what you could do in here to do something different with your service. But probably the structure will be pretty much the same. Usually use a timer. The timer allows you to dial in how much does this service run. So in my case, it runs every second. But the reality is, for a lot of services, it could run every minute, or every 10 minutes, or every hour even. So next we have to do is we actually have to wire this up to be called. We have this class, but we're not actually calling it anywhere yet. And that's where top shelf comes in. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by saying var exit code equals host factory. Do a control dot there to bring in top shelf. So using top shelf right here. So factory dot run. This is where it's actually going to run our service, and we'll say that it's going to say x, and our arrow function, or our equals greater than, whichever you want to call it. And put our semicolon at the end before we go in here and put code. And this sets up the service. This is top shelf specific code. They do have great documentation on their website, and I'll link to that in the description. I'm really following their pattern pretty much, because it's pretty basic. Because all you want this to do is just wire stuff up. So x.service, and the service is going to be heartbeat. That's the service we want to call. And using that, we'll say S for service, and the arrow function again. I can't use X because I'm already inside of this one, which uses X. So S for service. S.construct using, and we'll say heartbeat, arrow function, new heartbeat. And that calls a constructor for the heartbeat service. And then when started, we need to say, and I can use the same heartbeat, not capital H, lowercase h. And we'll say that arrow function heartbeat dot start. And what this is doing is just saying, okay, when you want to start, call the start method on the heartbeat class. It'll do the same thing again, but instead of when started, it's going to be when stopped. And we're going to call the stop method. So call start when started, call stop when stopped. And the constructor to use is the empty constructor. So that sets the service up, but we're not quite done yet, because we want to say, well, how do you want this service to run? Now a service, let me just bring my services back over, and let's open up a service. It doesn't really matter which one. Notice here there's a startup type. We'll get to that in a minute. But there's also who you log in as. Local system account or a specific account, and there's other accounts as well you can use. So there's different options services can run under. And what those different options do is they give you different permission levels. And I don't go into all the things services can do as far as which permission levels do what. I'll just do the simplest one, which is run as, and you have your options here, a network service, a local system, a local service. We're going to choose local system. And that should give us all the permissions we need. Now, the last thing I want to do for this service is I want to set up the basic information. And again, let's bring the services back in. We have our name, notice sensor space service. Well, that's the friendly name for this, because this service is actually called sensor service no space. We can read that. And then it's got this description here as well, which is a whole long description that tells you what this service does. We want the same thing for our service. So let's set up x.setServiceName, and this is the no space name. Okay, this is the machine friendly name. Okay, so no spaces. So let's say heartbeat service. Now we can set the display name. This is what we tell the users the name is. Notice I'm using a space in there. And now we can set the description. The description is something much larger that describes what we do. So this is the sample heartbeat service used in a YouTube demo. Let's make sure we get the semicolon at the end. So now we have all of this set up, but notice I'm capturing the output of host factory.run. Notice it says top shelf exit code, and I'm grabbing that as exit code. This will continue to run as long as the service is running. But once it stops, it's going to grab this exit code. And so I want to capture that and convert it into an int. So int exit code value equals, we need to cast to an int this value. Convert dot change type, and this is the exit code dot get type code. So what this does is exit code is an enum. It's going to convert it over to an integer, which we then capture in our exit code value. And now when we say environment dot exit code equals exit code value, that's that integer. And the reason why is because exit code needs an integer, and so they have mapped all the different type of exit codes to an enum to make it easy, but then we have to map it back to an int in order to return that to the environment.exit code. So yes, that's a lot of saying exit code, and it might be a little confusing looking at these two lines, but essentially all it's doing is converting it from a enum to an int and passing it out. And if you have to, you can copy and paste these lines and they'll work every time, as long as you make sure these names are consistent. And if you want to change something, like you call this something else, I think that I think Top Shelf call it something else, HR or something like that. Well, you just rename this HR and then rename these two things as well to be HR, and you're good to go. So if it's a little confusing, I understand, but the reality is you just need to know how to convert from an enum back to an int. Okay, guess what? We're done. We've got our service ready to go. Now let's test this out by running it as just a console application. So I'm going to hit start here. And notice it says, okay, success, name, display name, description, service. And it says it's now running. Press Control-C to exit. And if I bring over my demos folder, notice I have in C temp demos a heartbeat file. It was not there before. Let's open that up with Notepad++. And Notepad++ has a fun feature. Under the View menu, it says Monitoring. And what it'll do is refresh this every time the file changes. And notice it keeps incrementing the value because we keep writing to this text file every second. So it's working the way we intended it to. Now let's go ahead and hit Control-C here. And notice it stopped. 42 seconds was the last time we wrote to that file. Let's close that down, turn off monitoring first, and we're going to close this down. And now what we're going to do is we're going to install this service. So back over here, just remember that there is no service called Heartbeat. We call it Heartbeat service. So G to HO, so there's no Heartbeat service. So I think I was going to call it something else before, but anyways, simple Heartbeat service. That's what I was thinking about. We're going to call it Heartbeat service. So that's the difference. But group policy client to host guardian client service, so there's no heartbeat in the middle. Let's go ahead and change that. If we right click here and say open folder in File Explorer, that's going to open up our project file. Inside the bin debug, there is the heartbeat service.exe. What I'm going to do is I'm going to grab everything here. I don't need the PDB file, but I'm going to grab it anyways. It's fine for what I need to do. I'm going to come over to my folder here in the demos. I'll create a new folder for Heartbeat Service. And in here, paste that exe. Now, this is not the squirrel-like deployment we'd like. And so, yes, you'd want to do a more actual deployment, but this is the simplest way of doing it. Okay, this is really simple. I'm going to show you a simple way. You can go on and figure out how to do the further deployment with Squirrel, or I can show you in a later video. But for this video, you can just put this on a thumb drive and put it into a folder you want to keep. And the key here is this folder, you can't delete it later, because this is where the service is actually going to run from. So I've chosen this location right here for a simple heartbeat service.exe. I copy that path. I'm going to open up a command prompt, and let's just say run. I'm going to do it from my run as menu. And the screen flashed there for minutes because I did the administrative command prompt. So administrative command prompt gives me all the access I need to install this. So I'm going to say cd and paste in that path to change directory to that location. Now it's called simple heartbeat service.exe. So to install this, what I need to do is say simple heartbeat service.exe install, and the last command I'm going to do is say start. So what that'll do is it'll install this service, and it's going to start it too. So let's run that, and it says you're good to go. The heartbeat service was started, it was installed, and in fact, if we come back over here and we open this back up with Notepad, and we turn back on the monitoring, you'll notice that the date and times are updating automatically. And that's because the service is running. Now, I just move this out of the way. I could close this because it's already done. Notice this back at the command prompt. You don't have to keep this window open. But I'm going to just because of the fact I need to get back here to make some other commands. But to show you that it's installed, let's refresh this list. And now Heartbeat Service is listed here. The description is correct. This is a sample heartbeat service used in a YouTube demo. And it says heartbeat space service, and it's currently running. Now I could stop this, and now it's stopped. And if you look over here, in fact, it's no longer refreshing. So that's a service in a nutshell. It's very easy to install, and actually it's also very easy to uninstall. And that's another key feature here. And that's the reason I kept this open. So if I want to uninstall this, instead of saying simple heartbeat service install, I just want to say uninstall. It's saying it's already successful for removing it from the system. It's still wrapping up a couple things. Now it's completed and we're done. So now to come back over here and refresh, the heartbeat service is no longer there. Really simple to do. So what we learned? We learned it's really easy to install a service. It's really easy to create a service. And it's really easy to do things with a service. Now, obviously, writing to a text file, not the best use of a service, especially since you probably blow it up at some point because it's just going to get too big. But there are other things we can do, and let's talk through some of the other things we could do. One of the things you could do is you could have a folder cleanup routine. So for example, I use my downloads folder a lot. I keep a lot of junk in there. I just forget to clean it up because I download something and then I just need to get it cleaned out because I'm going to do something with that file if I really wanted it. Otherwise, it just kind of sits there. And so you can actually have a service run probably every hour even, and just delete everything in the downloads folder. Just wipe it all out. And maybe you only delete things that are older than a certain time. That way you're not going to delete a currently downloading thing. But you could delete everything that's old out, maybe even once a day if you wanted to. But do it automatically, not something you have to think about, oh, I need to run that process. So a little service. Another one is I have a ton of pictures. I take pictures all the time. And if I could have some little tool that just organized those pictures into maybe a folder by month, by year, so a year folder, then a month folder, and maybe even a day folder. And then it would just sort them into the right spots. Well, I could do that using a tool where I just dump all my photos into one file or one folder, and then this tool would say, oh, there's new folder or new files here. I'm going to take every picture file, not anything else, just the picture files, and sort them based upon the date they were created. If you're working for a company or you're working with some system where you're getting a CSV file, you could have that CSV file automatically processed. Just create a little folder on your desktop or somewhere that the service watches. And you dump a CSV file in there, it opens it up, it reads it through, it parses it out, and it puts it into a database. And it's all just automatic. There's no thought about this running process. So then the next thing you could do is have that folder be in your OneDrive and share that out with clients or other people. And they could put the CSV files in there. And then when OneDrive downloads those CSV files, it processes them. So on the kind of the reverse of it, it could watch a database. And every time it checks, and maybe it's going to check once a minute or so, if there's new records in a table, then it could process those records. For example, it could email customers and then move them out of this table. Or, an idea is a help desk. So a new person submits a help desk request, it goes in the database, and then this system watches that, and as soon as it sees a new record, it emails that person back and says, your help ticket has been submitted, we've got it assigned, and here's the information, here's the ID or whatever it is that we've assigned to it. So there's a lot of things you could do on an automatic basis that a service would be great for. So there's a lot of power here, there's a lot of stuff you could do. Just be careful, because the other side of it is, since there is so much power here, there's also so much possibility that you could do something harmful. For example, don't leave this service running forever.
Okay, so I wanted you to see, different services that we can run. Like I said, and then as a sysadmin, there's chances that you will go create services and have them running on one of your Windows servers, and they can be doing anything from monitoring log files to moving log files, deleting log files, messaging, ensuring the messages are passed from one server to another. So there's a lot out there that we do with our services. Moving on to securing directory information operations. The Active Directory, we should limit the number of administrators with access to Active Directory. Ensure that administrators use separate admin user accounts. The administrators should have one account for AD administration and at least one other account for other admin tasks. We should create an AD security group and require AD administrators do the AD work only on a dedicated terminal servers inside of workstations. So you don't have usually your Active Directory work is done by your NOC, depending on how big of a organization you have. Our directory service restore mode, change the password from the default password always, and we should be doing that across all our applications. And then periodically change that password and protect the password for each domain controller and change it at least every 6 months is what's recommended. Hardening Microsoft Windows OS administration. After creating other user accounts with administrator privileges, disable the default administrator account, enable strong passwords, set administrator passwords to expire on a regular basis, create and maintain baselines, and create full backup of each system before and after any hardening changes. We should also create individual backups and policies each time they change, and ensure Windows systems are updated to the latest patch. That's true with the, Linux as well, and our applications. And ensure Windows Update is configured to automatically download and install latest updates from Microsoft. We definitely want to do that, on our user machines. On our servers, sometimes, we have a change window, and we wait and apply those changes during the change window. Our GPO, console or backup GPO, you can see that you can just right click and then go to backup. And then Windows, you can check for updates, make it, change during certain hours. You can view update history, and they have automatic ones. And so you go to the advanced updates, and you can automatically download, and you choose when to have it installed, or choose that you need to approve it to install it. Hardening server computers, ensure the server computers don't do anything they're not supposed to do, such as run unneeded services. And we went over services. Hardening services that are supposed to provide. After installing the server, run Security Compliance Toolkit, or SCT, to disable unneeded roles and services. Use Nmap utility to identify open ports and close ports that aren't needed. Enable IPsec for server-to-server communications. We always want to install encryption where we can. Use malware protection on our workstations, mitigate vulnerabilities, disable program and services not used, and review our firewall settings. For data accessing controls, we want to minimize the number of user accounts on a computer, carefully control access to accounts with administrator rights, use Windows group policy to establish access control lists, or ACLs, avoid allowing anonymous or guest user accounts to access sensitive data, protect data at rest with Windows encryption file system or BitLocker. We went over EFS BitLocker a few weeks ago, and ensure data backups are encrypted as well. Hardening communication and remote access, we want to use our network access controls, authentication servers, and make use of VPNs and encryptions. Hardening with PKI, the public key infrastructure, is the hardware, software, and policies and procedures to manage all aspects of digital certificates. And it makes environments more secure. Ensure all computers participate with our hardened, and we need hardened certificate authority servers. And so we can set those up locally in our organization, and we can also use public CA servers or certificate authorities. And you can see that in your web browser. Ensure the CAs are physically secure and only accessible by authorized administrators. Backup our certificate authority keys and store them in a safe location. And use our GPOs to distribute root CA certificates. So some reminders. We should look at physical posters and banners in conspicuous locations such as bake rooms, cafeterias, around printers, fax machines, and shredders. Mail out newsletters, use social media and security policy updates. Periodic website reminders, use social media messages, daily or weekly tips. Contest with security themes. We can do lunch and learns, have events, and then involve our leadership as well. And the more visible our security is, the better off the organization will be. Best practices, we should install only the Windows Server Core option when you don't need extra functionality. Select the minimum number of roles in Windows Server. Run SCT immediately after installation of Windows Server. Update and patch systems again. Configure for automatic Windows updates. Install the Microsoft MBSA, which we went over before, and at least one vulnerability scanner. And create one or more user accounts with admin rights. Continue, we need to disable the admin and guest user accounts, disable all unneeded services, close all ports not required or needed, create GPOs for all security settings, including firewall rules, use Active Directory to distribute all configuration changes using GPOs, create a backup of each GPO, scan all computers for open ports and vulnerabilities, limit physical access to all critical servers, and create an initial baseline backup. Further, we need to change the Active Directory DSRM password periodically, or at least every 6 months. Install anti-malware software on each computer. Ensure all anti-malware software and data are current. Use the NAC software device, network access controlled software device, to control remote computer connections. Use remote authentication methods to authorize remote computers or users. Require secure VPNs to access internal network resources. Use IPsec with digital certificates to authenticate computer-to-computer connections in the data center. Require security awareness training prior to issuing access credentials. and it should be periodic as well. Require periodic concurrent security awareness training to retain access credentials and provide continuing security awareness. So in summary, we went over general hardening concepts and strategies. We looked at hardening our servers, our clients, our networks, and we talked about security awareness. There's a couple other resources that I wanted to show you. So, one is InfoSec. That shows Windows 10 hardening techniques, and they do this for each one. But what is hardening? Doing a secure installation, clean up the unwanted programs, make sure we're encrypting all our data. Always do our service packs, patches, and updates. Look at our BIOS. Enable all these cards, our device guard, credential guard. Get rid of the unneeded services. Use Windows Defender. We want to manage through group policy objects. We want to provide ransomware protection. We want to use secure authentication and use secure web browsing. And there's more resources available. Let's see.
With 45 machine identities for every human identity, fast-paced cloud development can quickly turn into a brewing storm. Secure machine identities and secrets with intelligent privilege controls from CyberArk.
A little bit of time, I may add a Linux server security.
Look at my crack.
Inappropriate. Why do we have a crack in our windshield?
I was so distracted.
Pretty good one.
You've been asking for it for months now,
but it's
almost obsessively, and it's finally.
One of the issues we have is like all the different versions of Linux, but we do have, best practices as well. Went over the hardware changes. Let's see. And finally, that's the last one we went over with hardware changing. So I may add a optional video about Linux a little bit later in the week. Again, make sure that you get the discussions done in the labs for this week, and then this week is the written assignment too as well. As always, send me any questions that you have, and I look forward to your assignment submissions. And we are getting closer to the end of class. You can work ahead and finish the class early. Like I said, if you have any questions, just feel free to reach out to me. And I hope you have a great week this week.